Hey, deserving listeners, we have a very special guest with us today. She is going to remain anonymous because we want to get into talking about her experiences at work in which she works for the government, and we're not identifying which government. It could be anywhere in the world, but what she does is she works with child safety for the government. These positions have different titles around the world, like Child Protective Services, this kind of thing. We're also not identifying that because I want to learn about Anonymous's. What name should we refer to you as?
I know, I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, wait. But let's go with Rachel.
Rachel. Okay, Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And I will, at times, as you know, talk about Child Protective Services or other sorts of workers for the government. And there's a lot of nuances to it. But one of the things that I'm often ranting about is the public tends to look down or blame CPS, Child Protective Services, whenever there's a problem. And certainly there are social workers and governmental agency employees who are at fault, and there are some famous cases of that. But generally speaking, these are bleeding heart, compassionate, overworked, underpaid, underappreciated people who are lying awake at night, staring into the darkness, worrying about all the kids that are being harmed, and
you just described my Friday night. Yeah.
So tell me more about your experience, please, Rachel.
Well, so, it's funny. For a really long time, I'm just going to refer to it as CPS. I think that's the easiest, Child Protective Services. For a long time, despite having the credentials to work for CPS, didn't want to work for CPS, knowing the amount of work that it would take, the amount of caseloads, that everybody's overworked, lack of resources, the fear that you're going to be responsible for a child getting hurt is like my worst nightmare, right? Nobody goes into this because they love being stressed all the time. You go into it because you care about children, and it's usually because you have some of your own story, or I think some of your own personal experience at play. Like I know I find protecting children so important. I've been in situations before where I wish I was protected a little bit better. So, I have a personal motive. And anyways, I was very resistant to joining CPS. I had to. Well, I guess I didn't have to, but youth work wasn't paying the bills. So I had to get a different job. But it was really scary. It was super intimidating.
So you mentioned that when people think about this career, working in CPS, they don't visualize some of the downsides. But what do they visualize? Because I'm thinking as a therapist, when I dreamt of being a therapist, I had this vision of sitting in an office like in the movies and hearing people talk about their deepest, darkest secrets and crying, and I'm there listening compassionately, and the client walks out of the office and says, "Oh my God, I'm healed," or whatever. There's some kind of cartoonish version of it. What did you visualize?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I ever really had much of a visualization as I did of just fear. I think I was really scared, actually. I kind of applied for the job thinking, I'm not going to get it. Oh. And then I got it. I was like, oh, shoot.
So what were you afraid of? What was the fear?
I think feeling like I was out of my depth. I wanted to be, so within I guess, the government, there's different branches. So I didn't really know kind of like what I was getting myself into, or what, like, I was just really sort of applying jobs that said I needed a social work degree and had this amount of experience, and I was just applying. And this one appealed to me. I'd love to get into specifics. Unfortunately, I can't. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it was kind of like, if I get it, great. If I don't, it wasn't meant to be. I'm probably not qualified anyway. But when I got it, I don't know. I guess like I did sort of romanticize the idea of saving children. Like, oh, don't worry, I'll take care of you and I'm going to make everything better and I'm going to go into this home and fix everything. And that is unfortunately far from the truth a lot of the time.
What is the truth?
Um, we were chatting about this a little bit prior to recording, but the truth is that you really just assess safety. And a lot of the time, if you do have to be more intrusive with interventions, like removing a child from a home, it doesn't mean that it's a good situation. It is a really big fear of mine that placing a child in a foster home, or even with their own family or like another community member, that happens too, that they're going to be harmed. And it's so damaging. It's so damaging. Even if you have, wait, can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay. Even if you have shitty parents, to break that attachment, that is so, so, so damaging. And the branch of government that I work for recognizes that. We do everything that we can prior to breaking that connection. And even when that's done, we still do supervised visits. We still want to keep that bond, having connection with your parents. That's a parent's right. Like that's at least what I've been told. And that's kind of what I try to live by.
Right. I would be a part of these meetings and hearings with CPS and with judges and lawyers. And that was clear that everyone wanted to uphold and respect the rights of the parents. And the government does not want to overstep or infringe on those rights lightly. And there are a lot of things that they will do prior to taking the kids out. Like the role that I held was that the government would hire me to go into the home to try to fix the problem so that there wouldn't be an escalation with CPS so that the kids would be removed. Or I would be involved in reconciliation services when the kid would be coming back, either a week after being removed or 2 years after being removed, depending. And it was always the hope that you could keep the family together, even when, from an outside point of view, it's clearly not ideal for the kid. But the kid is bonded with that parent. When you hear people in public and online talking shit, if I'm going to have a potty mouth like you, Rachel, if people are talking shit about CPS, how do you feel about that?
I get it. It comes from a place of, I understand it. And I know that really when people are talking shit, it's because they care. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so upset. If they didn't care about children, then they'd be like, whatever, who cares, la, 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 la. Like there's a rage that is associated with that. I understand it. And I think rage is a useful emotion, but I wish that it could be channeled a little bit differently. I wish that we could use it like, hey, why don't we put more funding into this branch of government? Hey, why don't we pay for more resources? Wouldn't that be awesome? Instead of just always blaming, the frontline staff, because sometimes I feel like I go into situations with my hands tied. And
what do you mean? Tied by what? By lack of funds?
By policy.
By policy.
By politics. Yeah. Yeah.
So because politicians, that was one thing that I learned, was that as a contractor with CPS and DSHS and the government, a new politician would be elected, or a politician would have some kind of wild hair up their butt. Is that the idiom? I don't know. But they would get some sort of kooky idea and they would want to completely revamp the funding structure. And it would just trickle down, and suddenly everyone would have to change everything that they did. And people would lose their jobs because they were no longer viable or funded. And us as therapists would suddenly have to learn a brand new form of quote unquote evidence-based therapy. And I would always think like, this politician doesn't even know what they're talking about. they're just this politician, and maybe they have a friend who does this kind of thing. I don't know. But they, in a meeting, just decided that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And now everyone has to suffer for it. And and the politician can sell it well. Like if they're talking to the press, they have some kind of bullet point, some kind of justification. But if they talked to the actual therapist and to the social workers, they'd be like, that's not what we need. What we need is more money, or we need more leeway, or we need more protections for us, or we need more ability to actually help the families. We need to lower our caseload so we can pay more attention to but the politicians, they have a slick thing. So did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that I feel like, at least with the branch of government that I work for, we are so reactive, and it's a top-down approach. Like you already said, it's this politician, it's somebody up here who's like, this sounds real nice. Let's do this. And you're like, whoa, wait. Have you even been like out on a home call or a home visit or an incident? Like, do you have any idea what it's like? It's also so different by community. It's so different by city. It's so different by region that what works in a well-populated, dense city doesn't work for the northern remote communities.
What do you mean?
So
What do you mean? Because to get a little specific, I was looking a lot into the Ruby Franke case. I don't know if you were following that case.
Oh yeah.
And Jody Hildebrandt. And in a nutshell, from my understanding of the reporting, the family of Ruby Franke and others associated with, I think, Jody Hildebrandt, had been calling CPS, Child Protective Services, for years with very credible allegations, and not just rumor, because there were people online that would watch the videos and would report them, but there were family members. I believe Ruby Franke's own sisters and Ruby Franke's oldest child, the daughter, had been routinely contacting CPS, and CPS, from my understanding, did a house visit or something, but they didn't go beyond that. And it took the children being literally tortured, and this had been going on for decades. So hundreds of kids, maybe thousands of kids tortured like this. It took a brave young boy, I don't know how old he was, somewhere around 10. He escapes and he goes next door, and he's emaciated, he's dehydrated, he's got open wounds on his ankles and his wrists, and they call the police, and you can't ignore this. You have a child who was essentially abducted and tortured. Now they have to do something, and they finally did something at that point. So my guess, and this is total speculation, is that in small town Utah, which is fairly conservative and fairly, this is just my anecdotal experience, and people in Utah will tell me this as well, that they don't like government involvement, because historically in Utah, government involvement meant suppressing their religion of
right.
LDS. And they, I don't know, but might have a culture, even among the CPS workers themselves, where the bar is so high that essentially no child is protected, maybe in small town Utah. I don't know. It's all speculation, but given your experience, what is the difference in culture regarding, or the circumstances regarding, rural and city CPS work?
Well, man, there's a lot to say. So for example, I feel like there's sometimes policy that comes into place, and I don't want to be too specific, but we talk about like who's going to do what job. They're like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. There's new policy regarding visits. I'll say that, and about seeing children, which was great policy, great idea. But when you're already struggling to keep up with the caseload that you have to, like, government has to also come up with another idea, like maybe hire and have a position where somebody's job is just to go out and conduct these visits. This is like so vague, so I'm wondering.
Well, what I'm hearing is that top down, they'll make a new policy change based on dubious information or motivation, and suddenly now either it degrades your ability to protect children's safety, or makes your job just like strangely more difficult, which takes time away from trying to protect children. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and sometimes not always so dubious. Sometimes it does come in from like an actual report where it's like a child has died. And that's
Oh,
also sometimes what happens where it's like, oh my God. And I understandably, I get it. Like that's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario has happened. And we get so much flack for it, which again makes sense. But now there's a huge haul over what we're doing. And it's like, okay, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now it's like we have supervisors on our back and this, and they're like, do this, do this, do that.
right. And it only addresses that one sliver of potential problem. It doesn't address the overall thing, right? Like if they did a whole system-wide audit and found, ooh, we need to change the whole thing. We got to get more funding. We have to fire these people because they're not really doing anything or whatever. It's not that. It's like, well, we just don't want to be humiliated in this one way. So
Yes.
don't ever let this happen again. So we're going to create all this busy work and rules. But lightning doesn't usually strike twice anyway. Next month, the next crisis is probably going to be a completely different thing anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because these crises are kind of rare, in and of themselves. So yeah, that could be annoying. But I'm curious what it felt like to you, because I feel like we need to humanize the CPS worker, because I worked closely with a lot of them, and they were, very good people, very kind people, hardworking people. They weren't interested in being millionaires, because why would they choose this career path if they were? So what does it feel like? What's your motivation? What got you up in the morning?
My favorite thing about my job in the entire world, it is the moments where I get to actually work one-on-one with clients. I think I have a really strong skill at interviewing children, interviewing parents. And again, I have to be vague, but I'll say that the community I work in has such trauma with CPS, like a massive, massive, massive history and trauma with CPS. And so when I come knocking at the door saying, hey, it's me, CPS, there's such a trauma response and reaction. I've been yelled at, I've been screamed at this and that, and to try and I really find it an honor when I get to work with somebody and make them feel safe and make them feel like I'm not out to get them and I'm actually just here to understand what's going on. And it sounds like you're struggling. If this is true and if this is going on, like it sounds like there's a lot on your plate, and how can I help offset that with you? I love that.
And you were successful at that?
I would say that I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that I'm pretty good at it. I would say that
that's
I'm
a
pretty good
taller,
at that.
I mean, I had a lesser mountain to climb with that, because they saw me the same way when I would go to the house, because they just figured I work for CPS, or I am a CPS worker. And I would tell them I'm a private practitioner. I have an office. I'm just a therapist, and they hire me. And you have confidentiality with me. There's certain things that you don't have confidentiality around, and I'm going to tell you what that is. But if you told me, for example, that you're using drugs and you told me not to tell anyone, I wouldn't tell anyone. Now, if it gets to a certain level of child safety, then I am mandated to, but it's a pretty high bar, and I take that very seriously, and CPS understands that. They know that when they hire me. So it was easier for me to separate myself from CPS. They would still see me that way, of course, which is somewhat rational. But for an actual CPS worker to essentially completely upend generations of anger and trauma, that's quite a feat.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it doesn't mean that then if I have another incident on the same family that I've just, built a good rapport with, that they're happy to see me again. The next time I show up, they're like, what the, I thought we did this more, but I will say that, I think that at the very least, I'm making a little bit of progress. I don't think that I leave homes and families and parents and situations having them feel more harmed.
Yeah.
At the very least.
And you're showing up, genuinely saying, I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here to help. My ultimate outcome is that the whole family benefits, not just the kids, because kids benefit when the whole family benefits. So what can I do? There are resources. There are people I could talk to. I could get a therapist to come talk to you. And you're not like looking for any excuse to steal the kids away.
No, God, no. So in social work, we talk a lot about like strength based. And so I find that it's really important that I don't go in with a lack perspective. I really do think that there are things going well in all families, and it's important to harness that and to build off of that. And a lot of the time, parents create their own safety. Family creates their own safety. Sometimes, like, one of the parents they'll be using substances, and it's not our job actually to tell parents that they can't use substances, but it is our job to say, hey, you can't be drunk or intoxicated or under the influence in front of your children, caring for your children. So what's the safety around that? It's always about adding. I like, how can we make this safe versus...
Right. So we talked about this before we started recording, that you only have so much jurisdiction, and what your job is, according to the law and by policy, is that you are there to protect safety of the children, and anything beyond that, above that, like nuances of parenting or the fact that the parents are using substances, as long as it isn't directly and obviously affecting the safety, putting the children in danger, then you're not interested in, it sounds like you're actually not even interested personally, because it sounds like you have a personal moral or ethic that it's not your job to judge or to stop people from doing what they want to do. What you're interested in is the child safe, right? Physically safe and emotionally safe, I assume?
Yeah, emotionally safe, physically safe, although emotional harm is really tough to prove as a child protection concern. But physically safe, yeah, it's kind of the bare minimum. I mean, I do have opinions and I do have feelings and thoughts, but I have to, that's where I kind of pull into my own spiritual practice. Like, I think we all kind of have, like, it's like a self-care routine, something maybe that's a little bit more palatable for folks to say, like a self-care routine. Like, I have to be able to just have faith that it's like we're all on our own journey. And although I don't agree with this kind of parenting, the child is safe. And I have to trust that this kid is on their own journey in life and that they'll be okay at the end of the day.
Are you saying specifically you trust that God is overseeing and helping and will?
Yeah, God, universe, we're all on our own kind of spiritual journey. But that's what I have to rely on something. I have to have faith in something. Otherwise, like, this would eat me alive, right? Like, it's some pretty tough stuff that you deal with.
I was going to ask you about, because like, if you're limited in your power, how do you cope emotionally with the knowledge that, okay, sure, the kid has food, the kid has shelter, the kid is no longer being hit, but the parents are narcissistic. The one parent is no longer there. The other parent, all she does is talk about herself. She never asks the kid any questions. Whenever the kid talks about something that they achieved, the mom brags about something that she did herself. She's chaotic. The house is kind of a mess. There's no toys. There's a couple toys, but the kid is, playing with just like dog toys or something. For the public, they might think, oh, well, of course, then you're going to take the kids out of the home for that, right? But the fact is according to policy and funding, there just isn't that ability. But how do you cope with that? Or how do you sleep at night? How do you get through the day?
Yeah, you said, limited in power. Yeah, this helpless, powerless feeling sometimes. It's tough. I cry. I have to let it out. I do this when I'm driving. I do a few things, but this is like one thing that's kind of immediate that really helps. You might cut this out, I don't know, but driving down a highway when I'm by myself, roll down the windows and just scream. Why
would I cut that out? That's what I was. in the movie version of Rachel's life, Rachel the potty mouth CPS worker, that's in the trailer, man. Like driving down the highway and rolling down the window and crying and screaming.
And you let it all out. I've definitely pulled over and like just wailed because I'm scared. I'm scared too. Like you try your best, right? And if there's nothing that's there, like you can comb everything with a fine-tooth comb, but there's always no guarantee. So even when it's like I'm pretty sure that everything's going to be okay, or I'm pretty sure, or even when you have to deal with a really traumatic file or case, and you're like, okay, well, and you're addressing the situation and you're doing the best that you can to make things all better and blah blah blah. Like it still takes a lot on you because I don't know, I can empathize with that greatly. Being I could cry just thinking about it. Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
Yeah.
I want to cry about you, about that, the burden and the isolation. I mean, I assume you can talk with your coworkers and your therapist, but it's such a burden to bear. Yeah,
to think that, my therapist has definitely helped a lot. I brought this up with her because I think it can be triggering for me as well, though, because I understand what it's like to be vulnerable, to feel vulnerable, to not feel safe, to not feel secure or stable. And you're just like, that's an awful, awful, lonely, isolating feeling. And
so you feel bad for the kids.
I feel bad for the kids, and I understand that feeling. And so I can maybe put myself too well into those shoes, but and so it breaks my heart. But I've chatted about this before with my therapist, and she's, helped a lot. I really have to believe for my own well-being that they're on their own spiritual path and journey, and have faith that this isn't going to define them.
Yeah, it's interesting because you, having lived through it yourself, it sounds like.
A lesser degree. I wasn't like, it wasn't, but I think we all have to some degree, like trauma.
Yeah, but it sounds like on the scale of things, you weren't at the lower end of the scale, right?
I don't know. I'm sort of figuring out that myself.
Because I wouldn't call myself having been traumatized at all, by the way. So
yeah, I think you're one of the. I know a few people like you. You're a rare breed.
Yeah. I mean, if I stretch the definition, but I never felt unsafe or unloved, or I never even had to ask those questions. And I remember even noting that both my parents loved me and they loved each other, and it would always be that way, and it always has. My parents are still married after 61 years. And to this day,
wow.
they're still super kind, and and they never burden me with anything. When I feel like they should, anyway.
Wow, fascinating. That is really interesting.
So, and I'm not alone. So my point is that you're somewhere, but I'm
somewhere in there.
Yeah, for you, you have the personal knowledge that you got through it. It doesn't define you. It doesn't break you. It doesn't make you a broken person. Yes. And that's what you can sometimes believe yourself as a child in a family, especially if there's a lot of chaos and you don't want to invite friends over because you're just ashamed of your family. You feel like you're just doomed to be this monster or this broken person, and it'll never be different. And you know that that's not true. And so you're watching a situation that might be very difficult, but you know from yourself that people are resilient and the universe or God will provide for people, maybe provide a counterbalance. Is that what you're saying, that that people can survive?
Yeah. And also, if I remove myself a little bit, what does it say about me and the biases that I hold if I think, oh no, this awful thing has happened to this poor child. How are they ever going to survive or grow up or be a functioning adult in the world? What does that say about me?
What do you mean?
And it's kind of like, I think I'm looking at it from a lack perspective, almost like pity instead of a hopeful kind of perspective.
A belief in the human spirit.
Yeah. and I can't look like that. I don't want to be that either. I don't want to look at somebody and then pity them. Oh no, you poor, like that's gonna, there's a fine line, right? Between empathy and I think pity. And so if I pity you, what does that say that I think about you? I don't think that you're equipped. I don't think that you can handle it. I don't think that you're strong. And that's not the energy I want to put out there. I want to change that and think like, you know what, this sucks and I'm here with you and this is bad. There's no, I don't want to dismiss that, but I just, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to dismiss it, but I want to be able to kind of support people through it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I always liked my role compared to your role. I would work with people at CPS and they had the same hope and desire to help people and to change parents and to make families more stable for children. But they had hundreds of families on their caseload and maybe they had 15 minutes on average they could spend every 2 weeks with a family, maybe, and usually that was just a phone call. It wouldn't be driving out to the house necessarily. Whereas for me, I would have 8 families on my caseload and I would be spending 3 hours a week in the home just hanging out and providing therapy. But, there was the luxury of spreading those hours out for other kinds of activities, just playing a game with the 3 kids or something, And I also had the luxury of getting the parents to like me and to know me and sometimes depend on me. There could be pretty marginalized families that when I entered the home for these folks, they saw me as the enemy at first, but eventually they saw me as like this portal into the society, because if they're immigrants or extremely poor or they don't speak English, for example, there's this huge wall up between them and the world. They might not understand teenage life or child life, what it's like to be a kid in school. And I'm this American guy who can say, I was a teenager, I was a kid once, and let me tell you, parents from this place on the other side of the globe, what it's like and what to expect and how to interpret things and how to have some hope, And so I could do that and I could get the parents to change, not all the time, but I could start saying, hey, I like this part, but let's look at this part and let's give some more options. You don't have to use them, but let's brainstorm some other options other than yelling at your kids or something. And at least I felt like I could go to bed at night thinking there's more there's potential. I have some power. It's not hopeless. I'm not completely powerless. I have some road to work on this. It might not work, but at least my hands are on the wheel. Whereas for you, it's like, yeah, your hands are on the wheel when it comes to the bare bones safety issue, but when it comes to the ongoing emotional life and experience of the children, you don't have a lot of power. So what did that feel like?
That's tough. That's tough. And I was hoping that we would chat about this actually a little bit. And like depending on I feel differently also depending on the age range. We talk a lot in social work about autonomy and the right that folks have to self-determination. And, for little kids, again, I feel differently for everybody. So maybe I'll just go through kind of this, like my experiences a little bit with the stages, but like the little ones, like I don't know.
4-year-olds.
Yeah, 10, not 10, sorry, like 5 and under-ish. Oh my God. There are some kiddos that are burned to my brain. I don't work with them anymore. Anyways, they're actually in different communities now. So I don't hold those files, but, there are these kids and I got to see in real time how poor their attachment was with a parental figure. They had a really traumatic kind of history of just being moved and bounced and this, and they had to be removed.
Usually chronic drug abuse, right?
Um, yeah, it was a couple. I mean, different caregivers, right? So different problems. It was different caregivers, different problems,
But the
unfortunately.
original
Yeah,
reason why you got involved was chronic drug abuse.
yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good guess. Good guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. The children were removed, and we brought them to, I'm trying to think how much I can say. We brought them to this activity. We did this thing with them, and we had spent maybe 4 hours with them before they had to go with a different set of social workers and go somewhere else. Maybe, yeah, 3, 4 hours. And the way this little boy cried and cried and cried and wailed of like not like didn't want to let go, right? There was a sibling group, so I had one in my arms and one in my again, like it's crazy. It's crazy. Sorry, but
It's sad.
it's
It
sad.
makes you want to cry.
It makes me want to cry. And like, I have so much love for those kids. I have so much love for those kids. And I hope every day that they're doing okay. But yeah, because I had such a short influence on their life, that's kind of something that like will always be in the back of my mind. Like, what are they up to? Are they okay? I hope they're not repeating the same cycles. I hope that they can start new cycles with their own lives. So that's really tough, but seeing that in real time that they had no attachment to any parental figure was really hard. And I mean, the older we go, the more freedom you kind of have. And at least again in the branch of government that I work with, teenagers are a tough one. But I love teenagers, right? Like I have a history working with teens, and but that one's really really tough because the way that we work, I don't know your experience, but when you're kind of 12 and up, you get a lot of autonomy. You kind of get like free range a lot of the time. Not entirely, and there's nuances and stuff. Like I don't want to say that as a blanket statement, but you do get a lot of autonomy. We've realized that you can't take a kid and put them somewhere that they don't want to be when they're that old because they have the ability to run away, to do something like, and you're eroding that relationship with them. So it's about adding safety. And sometimes we have kids who live independently, like teenagers, about 16 and up, they can live independently. And you see them doing stuff and you're like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes, pump the brakes. Sometimes they think with their feet.
Doing
And
stuff
that's what,
like what do you mean?
like sneaking out or like doing, like dabbling with drugs or, getting into fights, stealing. There's like, it's usually kind of minor stuff. Sometimes, yeah, it's usually minor stuff. The stuff I really worry about is, like the drug use or like the not wanting to, I guess, be involved in your own future planning. Like it's kind of like, oh, screw school, screw this, screw you guys. A lot of the kids I work with have like suicide ideation as well.
Yeah.
So that's something that also freaks me out. But yeah, but with the older kids, with the teens, I mean, the way I just hope that I have to look at it like this, right? You're planting seeds. I guess in every case, in everyone that I work with, you're just planting little seeds, and I'm
Yeah.
not always going to be there.
It was a frequent refrain with us working with teenagers. In consultation, there would always be a fair percentage of our clients where we felt like we were getting nowhere with teenagers. And so we just kept telling each other, you're planting seeds, you're planting seeds.
Yes,
You just have to
you
hope. You just have to hope that you're planting seeds,
absolutely,
and
and
often
you're
you
not
are,
always
and
there.
often you are. Yeah,
Yeah, you just can't see it, and you're not there to see, what that seed turns into. But I just have to keep telling myself that because it's a lot of like, I don't know. I feel like I'm walking around in a circle half the time. I'm like, are we getting anywhere? Are we doing? Nope, same thing. Okay, but I have to, yeah, have faith that like, I mean, I've had some really great teams that I've worked with, and I love working with teens as well because they tell you exactly what they need, even if it's not direct. It's like just with their attitude or with their body language or with this. I'm like, I can work with that. But yeah, with the teens planting seeds and just hoping that like I build enough of rapport with them. I feel like all the teens I work with, sorry, I'm rambling now, but I feel like all the teens I work with I'd love if we could just get them all a one-to-one worker or like a youth worker or something, just a buddy that was trustworthy and safe and gave a shit and was there for them so that even when this kid was off doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing or maybe that was harming them or whatever, could come back to their safe place, to their safe person. And I have a hard time knowing that I can't be that person. I know that it wouldn't even be like appropriate or ethical or whatever, considering my job, but I wish that for everybody.
Yeah.
Especially
Well,
the teens.
so along those lines, if you could wave a magic wand and change the system, what would you do?
Ooh. I would start early. I think I would start with more preventative measures rather than the reaction. I would start with like classes in school about conflict and mediation and about self-care and about community and about, I don't know, I think that's honestly where I would start, to plant those seeds first.
So just for everyone in the community, regardless of red flags, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, like if in a perfect world, if I could have my way, that's the world that I would create, is that we would have some kind of like systems in place or classes or schools and more supports. Because the way the system is now is that we're reactionary.
Yeah.
We respond when something has happened. We can't really respond when we see the train wreck about to happen. We're like, ooh, that's going to be bad. But we can't do anything until it actually has happened.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, what would you change if you could change? And that's great, because that's mine too, is a public health initiative that is done sometimes. It's not completely foreign to at least my community, but if it was funded times 100, then we would start to see huge differences in outcomes 20, 30, 40 years from now. But trying to get that passed is apparently impossible. I mean, we can barely get funding for housing, affordable housing for people. But anyway, so if you could change something like that would happen in the next month or something, maybe it requires additional funds, but something that would make a difference in the lives of the people that you work with, what would that be?
My first thought was therapy, like to have an ample amount of therapists who offered a variety of different services. Because
Like what?
talk therapy isn't always for everybody.
Yeah.
But especially in the community that I work for,
So
healing is done.
different kinds of
Different
therapy
modalities.
forms, like
Yeah.
Santre or art or movement
Yeah.
or wilderness or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because talk therapy isn't for everybody. And although it's worked wonders for me, and I just know the folks in the community that I work with, it's just not that they're like, you want me to do what? No, I'm going to go out into the forest and put
Yeah.
my feet in the river. And like, that's healing for a lot of people. And I think that's great. But if we had more access to that for that and for everybody, that it wasn't such a challenge, getting folks connected to some kind of, because that's community, that's support, right? We all need that. And so that would be my angle.
Right. And it would address, in my opinion, the core and the cause of these issues, trauma and trauma
Yes.
reactivity, that leads to not only drug addiction, which causes all sorts of issues, but also anger and overreactivity to children,
Yes.
inability to regulate your emotions, and just being in a bad mood because you're avoiding closeness and
Yes.
vulnerability, and so you just get grumpy and you start yelling at anybody, including children. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what made a difference for you? I mean, you could have gone a lot of different directions, and you're one of the success stories. So what made that difference?
I've thought a lot about that. My cousin actually asked me that question a while back because she's like, I don't know, man. I was worried about you growing up. She's kind of the same thing. She's like, I was really worried. And like I have, I've parents who love me and care and they tried their best. And I know that we all kind of have to say that. It's a bit of like I have a loyalty to them, right? I always will.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there was some positives for sure, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. They tried their best, right? I don't know. I think even though I think, I don't know, a couple of things are coming to mind. I guess it was the seeds a little bit. There were some seeds that were planted through TED Talks, through teachers.
Like what? Like what kind of TED Talk? That's interesting.
I don't know. I'd always kind of watch stuff that would be like it'd be like all post-traumatic growth-esque, right? Of
Okay.
like, this shitty thing happened to me, but look.
So like strength-based positive
Yeah,
psychology kind of stuff
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
gave
And I
you
was,
hope of potential future instead of this like mountain to climb that is never ending, right? Because that can be the perspective. It's like, oh, you're traumatized. You've got to be in therapy for the next 30 years. You're screwed. That kind of stuff.
yeah, I think the way I like to look at it is that I don't, I mean, I guess there's the realm of likelihood and there's the realm of possibilities. And if it's happened before, that means it's possible. And I like that idea that I guess, I don't know, I've always kind of had like a thirst for knowledge. And I was like, why am I like this? I know something's wrong. I don't know exactly what, but I'd Google or I'd search up like what to do when you're feeling like this. Why am I feeling like this? What happens when you, and just being like, and it kind of lead me down a rabbit hole and getting exposure to that way and just being a little bit more curious and a little bit more curious. And just like doing anything not to feel shitty anymore. It's like, I don't want to feel shitty like that. I don't want to feel like this anymore. So what do I do? How not to be depressed?
Google,
Yeah.
I feel shitty. I don't want to feel shitty. How do I feel not shitty?
But
Well, did someone believe in you or did you just believe in
I,
yourself?
I don't know. I guess I kind of always felt maybe like a little special. I don't know why. I think it was because maybe I guess like my family dynamics and stuff. I think that if I were one of my siblings, maybe I wouldn't have felt that way, but I did always feel a little bit special.
Like your
So I
role in
think
the
that
family
helped.
was
Yeah.
special how? Like curious, smart?
Well, I guess so. I'm the only girl in my family. So I think that gave me a lot of attention and maybe a little bit of extra like, and my siblings are older, a lot older, right? So I kind of felt like not an only child because I don't want to say too many
Yeah, yeah,
identifying
yeah.
things,
Yeah, yeah.
but
But you
with my,
felt like people gave you attention
yeah,
and you felt special. You felt like
I
you
did.
mattered in the world.
I did. I had moments of that and I like that and that felt good. And then, and that was pretty early on, right? And then I guess somewhere maybe around like 5 or 6, maybe 6 and onward, it was just like trauma. It was just like family dynamics falling apart, people dying, people getting like just crazy stuff.
Okay.
So I mean, I guess I built a little bit of that foundation. So perhaps that helped me,
Yeah.
having a little bit of that foundation, being young and feeling like I'm super important. And then so when I grew up feeling like, wait, I don't feel important anymore. But I know that I have been important,
Hmm.
just trying to chase that feeling or get that feeling again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make a lot of
Okay,
sense. A
cool.
lot of sense. Yeah.
Cool.
And that is my model of understanding trauma, that if you have a foundation of relatively good parenting and attachment, lack of chaos prior to 5 or 6, and you experience a lot of difficulty after that, it's much better than the opposite. You know, you can have a completely wonderful life post 5 years old, but if 0 to 5 things were really rough, then it's a lifetime of difficulty commonly, not all the time. But so if you could tell the world to consider something when they think about CPS in general around the world, what would you tell them?
That we try our best. And that we try our best. And I think the best way to create change, because if you hate us, that's what you mean. Like you want something different. Then lobby the politicians, become a foster parent yourself. That would really help if there are foster parents out there. And like, honestly, again, sorry, going a bit on a tangent, but just be kind to one another. Like you never know what people are going through and you never know what that seed is going to plant in somebody else. When you're kind to another person, if they really need that. And I just think that then creates a trickling effect. And I love that. So just be nice, even to us.
Yeah. I think that's not unreasonable to ask for.
Yeah.
Final question.
Yes.
When you are watching me react to different reality TV shows, what have I said that has made you the most angry at me?
Oh, I don't think I've ever felt that
Or what have you
way.
disagreed with? Or what have I said that you're just like, oh, come on, Kirk, that's ridiculous.
I honestly, I can't think of one. I'll let you know, but that's never the feeling that I've associated with you. I can't at least
Oh,
consciously think of a feeling of been like, all right, you're way out of left field here.
well, you truly
But
are a positive person.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe no. I'm trying to think even back to like the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trials. Maybe I was like, I don't know that I was like, do I believe, I guess it was more questioning myself. Do I believe in, um, like, what is it, unilateral abuse or like both, like abuse towards, I'm like, huh, I'm like,
Bi-directional.
but doesn't, bi-directional, I'm like,
Okay.
don't folks, doesn't someone start it? That was my question. I just had more questions.
Okay.
Not that I necessarily disagreed, but I was like,
Yeah.
does somebody start that though? And then is it just a retaliation? And then it becomes bi-directional
Yeah.
was my question.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing back that trauma for me. Just joking. Well, I'm curious. So, did you watch a lot of that
I
video?
did. I
Okay.
think I watched all of it.
Yeah, it was like 65 hours of stuff.
I watched.
It was intense, and it was actually very fascinating to make all that content and to talk with a lot of the listeners and stuff. But I'm curious, did I ever adequately explain bidirectional abuse? Because that was one of the flashpoints. That was one of the things that people
Could
had
you
a
jog my memory?
well, so it's been 2 years and a lot of therapy, but in the trial, I can't remember if there was an explicit claim or if it was just a topic that was being discussed among the public of this concept of bidirectional abuse. And there was this universal consensus among the people in the public saying that bidirectional abuse is a myth. And
Yes, yeah,
and what I was saying, which is as an expert in partner
yeah,
violence and looking at the literature and the consensus in my field, it's more nuanced to that. Because, yes, abusers will often point to victims having been defensively violent with the abuser and claim it goes both ways as a way to
right,
diminish their responsibility and to evade sometimes legal consequences.
right,
So we should always be suspicious, or at the very least, when we even have videotape of both people hitting each other, we should investigate further to find the overall pattern, the amount of
right,
times, why is each person being violent with the other person, what are the circumstances, who's being intimidated, really, because if I'm being intimidated, I might lash out physically as a way of just trying to fight back, but the overall
right,
pattern is I'm being intimidated, I'm being scared, I'm being kept out. You can even have a situation where the victim is the only violent person and the abuser is just constantly berating and gaslighting and controlling. You know what I mean? So the point is we just want to be careful about drawing any conclusions
right.
based on incidents of violence or, and also accounts of violence. Having said all that, there are cases in which you have two people who are abusing the other person, and both people are victims and both people are perpetrators. Maybe it's a 60-40 thing, but it absolutely happens. Two people come from abusive backgrounds, two people have emotional control issues, two people deal with their emotions in violent, controlling ways, and there's not an overall pattern where one person is overall intimidating the other person.
I mean, the stuff about attachment was like, you sort of trickle it in, right? But anytime you talk about attachment has like changed the way I see myself, the way I see others, the way I was like, what? I don't know. I found it all so fascinating.
How so?
I think it's helped me understand myself a lot better. I think that I maybe have like these subconscious motives taking over that I don't always understand. Like I'm just trying to get I kind of look at myself as parts sometimes. I'm like, this is the adult version of me. And then I'm like, there's something else going on. What's that? And when I can try to like decipher it and pick it apart, I see, oh, that's a really young, needy, juvenile part of me that is reaching out or wanting to do this thing that maybe the adult version of me knows that I don't want that or that's not okay. Like if I'm with a partner that I feel like I kind of have to prove myself a little bit, or I have to work for his love and acceptance, and like praise, if there's like this like hustling aspect almost, I'm like, the adult version of me is like, what are you doing? Like, this is not the guy for you. Forget it. You don't even like him that much. But I was like, there's something else that's pulling me towards him. And when I kind of do an inventory, I see that there's this little girl who's like, I have to do that. I have to prove my love. And I have to, because when I do it, then I get it back in return. And I reach like homeostasis. I'm like, oh, okay, everything is. But then the cycle repeats and it's just constantly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the awareness is that you have a need for closeness, that the adult side of you might be like, I'm okay on my own. But the little girl on the inside is like, I'm not okay on my own. So the shortcut is I'm just going to be the most pleasing, complimentary partner of all time. That will give me something very quickly of some kind of indication that someone loves me. But if you can see that, then you can honor that need in a more constructive way, in a more long-term way. Like if you're dating some guy after 3 dates, you're like, well, he's not really the guy I should be looking toward for attachment security. Maybe I need to call an old friend or someone that's there for me all the time and feel that I'm worth it and attached in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I do that all the time.
It's powerful.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very powerful. I do remember learning that in class, the power of vulnerability as well, to say like, to identify a need and it kind of like a bid, like, hey, I think that's the terminology that you use. It's a bit of a bid.
Yeah.
And to have somebody rise to that occasion is like, oh.
I know. Yes. Because they want it too. They want to give it and they'll be bidding at some point as well. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Well, Rachel, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been great to talk with you.
Thanks for having me.
Will, as you know, rant about CPS in a variety of ways, and it's good to actually hear from someone that does this kind of work. And I hope that the listeners can, because it's one thing for me to claim that the CPS workers that I've worked with are good people, well-meaning, and are actually doing wonderful work. They're just not lauded. You only hear about the disasters, you know?
That's very true.
You don't hear about the 99% of other cases, or at least the 75% of other cases where a lot of good is occurring because of the government's involvement. You don't hear those cases, maybe because CPS has a terrible approach to the media, which we talked about off air. They just don't have a PR effort at all, and that might harm them to some extent and make your job harder when you show up at someone's door, but and will distort the public's view and might result in lower funding because people don't want to increase funding for this kind of program. So they might benefit. So having this interview is my little bit of trying to move that forward a little bit of like, let's have a more accurate point of view of CPS. There are bad things. There are bad CPS workers. There are disasters, but most of the time that's not happening, and most of the workers are extremely competent and loving. And let's see the government agency in an accurate light, and also let's have policy and tax policy that can help these individuals so that they can help the families, because there's so many kids out there that are slipping through the cracks because there just isn't enough funding. And it's not just for what you're saying, for what you do, but also what you say about therapy. Because if you fund CPS, because that's how I got involved, was there was enough tax dollars allocated so that they could pay for me to go into the house for free to the family. It was just paid for the government. So we need those programs.
Yes. And I mean, even not just CPS, but also like education and stuff like that. Like, why is it that we have public schools that are suffering so greatly? Like, how are we giving kids the tools to educate themselves and to, I don't know, learn and to do well in society if we can't even put money into their own education? And so it's multifaceted, right? It's a bit of a web. You kind of pull one area and you realize everything is interconnected. So that's also something to keep in mind. But we do get the short end of the stick a lot of the time, yes.
Yeah. My very unrealistic dream is that along with mathematics and English and history and science, every day there would be a class on attachment and relationships and emotions and regulation.
You and I hold the same dream.
Yeah. But it's absurd, right? It's absurd. Like, call
me crazy. I'm gonna hold out hope.
We're so far from that. Like, I know there are a lot of people out there that are doing that kind of work in schools, and it's wonderful. But wouldn't it be great if
it was commonplace
from the first grade? You know what I mean? They just every day there was another worksheet on emotions. There was another
that would change that would change everything. That would change society entirely.
Yeah. And it wouldn't even have to be political. You could even not, if there were conservatives that were upset, you could even not include, like, I don't know, like racism issues if they were sticklers for that. Like, it'd be nice if that was included as well. But you could just have baseline emotional regulation and trauma and psychological awareness. Then, well, now I want to start advocating for that. Because you're such a positive person. I suddenly now believe in this pipe dream.
I know. I was like, I'll just write a proposal. I'll just do that
on the side. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, and everyone out there, please take care of yourself. Why should people take care of themselves, Rachel?
Because you deserve it. You really, really do.